The person sitting across from you at dinner, same job title, maybe a lower salary, is building more wealth right now than you are, not because they know something you don't about the market, not because they have stronger financial discipline, not because they're sacrificing anything visible. Because of a single structural difference in how one specific category of decision gets made. And here's the part nobody says out loud. Everything you've been doing to close that gap, the effort, the awareness, the monthly recommitment to your financial habits, may be the exact behavior keeping the gap open. Here's what actually happens when you try to build wealth the active way. End of the month, you check the numbers, you made reasonable choices, you stayed aware, you resisted something, and the growth is still slower than it should be relative to the amount of mental space this is occupying. That mental space isn't free, and nobody told you that. Every time you decide whether to save this month, you spend something that isn't money. Every time you reevaluate your investment contribution, you spend it again. Every time you negotiate with yourself over a spending decision, override a purchase impulse, or recommit to a financial habit you already established 3 weeks ago, you're drawing from the same cognitive account that also runs your career, your relationships, and every other high-stakes judgment in your life. Decision fatigue doesn't look like exhaustion. It looks like a smaller investment the week a crisis hits. It looks like lifestyle expansion absorbing a raise before you've thought about it. It looks like a savings rate that fluctuates when it should compound. The people who are ahead aren't spending that resource on those decisions anymore. They closed those loops long ago, once. There is one shift, one architectural move that removes an entire category of financial decisions from your active judgment permanently. Not a mindset reframe, not a motivation upgrade, a structural decision about which choices keep requiring you and which ones stop. And here's the gravity of staying where you are. Every month you keep those decisions open, you are spending your highest quality cognitive capacity on choices that don't need your intelligence, while the actual wealth-building decisions that do require it are getting whatever's left. That is not a discipline problem, that is a systems problem, and those two things need completely different solutions. Think about what financial discipline actually looks like in practice for most people who are trying to build wealth. Income arrives, you decide how much to save. You evaluate whether to invest this month. You assess your spending against your goals. You resist the lifestyle expansion that becomes tempting the second you feel the money in your account. You recommit to the same financial habits you already had. Then you repeat the entire sequence next month. The month after that, every cycle the same decisions come back. Every cycle they cost you something. And here's what makes it quietly destructive. Those decisions feel productive. They feel like you're actively working on your future. The effort itself reads as discipline, but the effort has a cost that never appears on a budget line. The people who consistently build wealth, who had similar incomes when they started, sometimes less, made those identical decisions, but only once, when they designed their money system, and after that, those decisions stopped existing as recurring events. Savings move before the paycheck is touchable. Investment contributions increase automatically when income does. Spending parameters are enforced by structure, not by willpower applied in real time. The system executes. Their judgment does something else entirely. Here's a way to see this difference without flinching. Every financial decision you make actively is an open circuit. Your energy runs through it every cycle. When the circuit is open, it draws from you constantly, not dramatically, not in a way you notice on any given day, but every month, every paycheck, every time the same decision comes back around. When you close a circuit, when you pre-commit a financial behavior into a money system that runs without you, the drain stops. The decision is made, hardwired, it executes on its own timeline regardless of where your head is. And the energy that was running through that open loop, it doesn't disappear. It goes somewhere else. Specifically, it becomes available for the financial decisions that actually require your full capacity, income growth opportunities, capital deployment, the high-leverage choices that don't have a scheduled time to appear. The decisions where being clear-headed isn't optional. The people ahead of you haven't discovered a better savings strategy. They've closed more circuits, and the energy they recovered is compounding in places yours isn't. This is what financial freedom looks like before it looks like a number. It looks like a mind no longer occupied by the same decisions month after month. Now here's where the entire frame shifts, because most people misread this. When you hear automate your finances, the brain files it under efficiency. Set up the transfer, schedule the contribution, reduce friction. That's the version of this idea that gets shared. That's not the version that changes things. The version that changes things is what the closed loop gives back. When you remove a recurring financial decision from your active judgment, you aren't just protecting a savings rate. You're recovering the bandwidth that decision was consuming every time it cycled back. And that bandwidth, no longer occupied by whether to invest this month, becomes available for how much to invest next year, which income streams are worth building, which financial habits are actually worth doubling down on versus which ones are performance theater. The difference between someone who builds wealth steadily and someone who keeps trying isn't that one automates and one doesn't. It's that one understands what gets released when the system runs and deliberately redirects that resource into the decisions that compound. One architectural decision made once, it reorganizes where your best capacity goes. That's the shift. Here's the part almost everyone skips, and it matters more than the automation itself. There is one pre-committed behavior in personal finance that generates more compounding momentum than any other, more than the savings transfer, more than the scheduled investment contribution. And it gets skipped because it feels too simple to be significant. The automatic increase. When income grows, most people recalibrate their lifestyle before they recalibrate their money system. The raise arrives. Within a few months, spending has expanded to absorb it. The new baseline is set, and the income growth that could have compounded for 30 years disappears before a single financial decision was made, because it was absorbed before one was required. Closing this loop looks like one setup. Every income increase automatically allocates a fixed percentage to wealth building before the new income becomes accessible. The lifestyle never receives the signal that more is available. The system receives it instead. It is the single highest leverage action in personal wealth building. It requires no ongoing financial discipline, no monthly attention, and zero skill to maintain. And most people skip it because it doesn't feel like a strategy. It feels like a detail. It feels too easy to be the thing that matters. That detail, compounded over 10 years, is often the specific difference between options and the absence of them. There is an honest cost to keeping your financial decisions in your active judgment that goes beyond cognitive fatigue. When a decision requires you every month, it also requires your best version every month. The version that isn't navigating an unexpected expense, isn't coming off a week that depleted everything, isn't in a mental state where short-term relief competes directly with long-term gain. Your judgment is human. It responds to circumstances. And in the months when circumstances are hard, open financial loops don't wait for you to recover. They just produce smaller investments, lower savings, more rationalized exceptions to the financial habits you built. The system doesn't have bad months. It doesn't take hard weeks personally. It executes. Every open loop in your money system is a vulnerability point, waiting for the wrong version of you to encounter it at the wrong time. Here is the audit. 3 categories. Where your financial decisions currently live across all 3 is the exact map of where your wealth building capacity is being drained or protected. Category 1, decisions that execute automatically every cycle regardless of your circumstances or mental state. Savings transfers, investment contributions, debt reduction payments. If any of these require your active participation each month to happen, they are open circuits. And every open circuit is a risk event waiting for a difficult week. Category 2, decisions that should have been made once and never revisited. The percentage of each income increase rooted to investment. The cap on lifestyle when earnings grow. The framework governing how windfalls get allocated. If you've made these decisions multiple times across different months, they haven't actually been made. They've been deferred, and deferred decisions are open loops with a different name. Category 3, decisions that genuinely require your best active judgment. Where to deploy accumulated capital as it grows, which income streams deserve serious development, which financial opportunities are worth accelerating contributions to capture before they close. These are the decisions that should be getting your clearest thinking. If they're not, look at categories 1 and 2. They're consuming it. The audit isn't complicated, the execution is, but you now know exactly where to look. What changes when those loops close isn't just efficiency, it's what you arrive with when the decisions that actually matter come around. You stop spending your sharpest thinking on whether to save this month and start spending it on how to grow what you're saving into. The money system handles the mechanics. You handle the direction. That reallocation, that single shift in where your cognitive capacity goes, is what separates the two groups. Not income, not financial knowledge, not discipline applied harder. Where attention is directed, and what happens to the attention that's no longer required somewhere it never needed to be. That's the architectural difference, and it doesn't require starting over. It requires one honest look at which decisions are still asking for you and closing them. One thing worth carrying into the next step. The financial behaviors that hold when automated aren't chosen randomly. There is a specific sequencing, which loops to close first, in what order, at which points in your financial development, that determines whether the system compounds or quietly collapses within 60 days. Most people who try to close everything at once find themselves reversing the setup by month 2, not because the decision was wrong, because the sequencing was off. That question, the architecture of how the system gets built and in what order, is the part worth understanding before you touch the next transfer.